Okay, so the first card that came out was the Magician in reverse. What I'm getting immediately, just intuitively from this card, is that a lot of us are tapping into the blocks that we're feeling to our personal power, right? So we're very powerful. We all know that, right? Like we're capable of creating our own reality. Of course, that depends very much so on the exterior circumstances and structures of power that are built around us. But that doesn't mean that we don't have our own interior personal power, right? In order to interact with our lives and create and help create, co create, some people say, the realities that we want to live. So this magician came out in reverse, and I think that's indicating that some of us are starting to recognize some of these blocks that we're up against. I think these blocks are both external and internal. You know what I mean? Certainly, I'm not someone who wants to ignore the fact that a lot of people are born into very difficult circumstances, and that can be a massive block for, stepping into your personal power. But, we also have a role to play as well. I think some of us have a lot of fear around stepping into our own personal power. Granted, a lot of that fear has been manipulated. People have told us that we don't have power, people have told us to be afraid of our power. And so, that, of course, that can be internalized because when you're brought up to be afraid of your own power, that's going to be something that's going to be very challenging for you to be able to step into. Let's see what else is going to come up. Yeah, we have the Nine of Cups. So this is a really positive card to come out. It's all about wish fulfillment. I'm seeing this as, being able to fill our own cups. I think you've heard that phrase, you can't pour from an empty cup. I think that we all have to learn, especially around this time, self-care practices. The self-care, I think, is going to be, and it's funny, when I picked this up, I picked it up in the upright, even though it came out in reverse. I sometimes when I do these readings and I talk about blocks and then I see the card come out in reverse and I pick it up intuitively in the upright, it means that we're clearing the blocks, even just talking about it. Like even just bringing awareness to these blocks can sometimes help clear them. So yeah, the Nine of Cups I think has a lot to do with seeing where we're not getting our own needs met. It's Mercury. It's Mercury retrograde. As y'all know, this is a fucking doozy of a Mercury retrograde too. Um, and yeah, I think slowing down as we do with any Mercury retrograde is a really important part of self care. I think we're having to learn to slow down and not go, go, go so much all the time in order to meet some of our needs for rest. This card came out, and yeah, again, I think we were talking about blocks in the beginning. A lot of the blocks have to do with overthinking, being afraid to move out of a prison that we may have played a role in creating. Of course, other people have played a role as well, but we play a role in creating our own prisons to a certain degree. But then, of course, that all happens in the context of the larger outside structures that we're you know, born into as well. So I think that's what we're working on. We're working on recognizing, okay, what can I do as someone who does have power to clear my own blocks and just play my part in stepping into my own power, even though that might be just one step of many steps and might happen in a much larger context, right? Okay, so Wheel of Fortune came out. I think that that's a really important card to get. This talks about major changes. Sometimes I even see it as the zodiac wheel, and when I see it just now, I'm being guided to talk a little bit about the astrology that we're under. We have a ton of water energy. We've been having a water grand trine that's been coming on and off. It's going to be triggered back up here by the sun moving through Scorpio in a couple of days. Basically, it just means that we have power player planets, big energy in the water signs, and they're all talking to each other in a trine, or it's a favorable conversation. So it creates this sort of flow, like a flowing loop of energy. And water is all about emotions. So we're talking about really leaning into our emotions and letting the emotions guide the way instead of our mind, right? Instead of the intellect. Like I think that's part of the reason why we've been blocked, is because we've been letting the mind run the show, and that's been leading to some of those blocks to our personal power. However, when we learn to step into that water grand trine, then you're really more in the flow, right? You're not pushing, you're not trying to control, you're not trying to plan. You're seeing what comes up for you. You're being open to receive, and you're letting that feeling and that intuition guide your next move. So in the next era that we're moving into, which is a massive astrological era that some people call the Age of Aquarius, which has been triggered already by Pluto moving into Aquarius, that's going to be sort of standard operating procedure. Like the heart rather than the head is going to be the leader instead. It's going to be a big change, especially when you're talking about a society that, it's a capitalist patriarchal society. That's a big change for that type of society, right? But you can already see it. You can already see it starting to happen. Yeah, just again with that confirmation, we're really not gaining anything from being stuck in our heads and overthinking and trying to control. We have to learn to let go and lean into that flow of emotion. I'm also just getting the sense to tell you guys that I think a lot of you probably need some rest, and I think this retrograde we have it's not just Mercury. I mean, we have a lot of planets retrograde right now. I want to say it's 6, and there are a lot of the outer planets. So I think that really is an invitation to rest. So I definitely would recommend that you guys prioritize rest. We were talking about self-care earlier. Prioritize rest as much as you can. This is the 8 of Swords, not the 4 of Swords, but that was the message I got from here. And then underneath that, we have the 9 of Pentacles. Yeah, this is us. We were talking about stepping into our personal power. Well, the 9 of Pentacles absolutely represents that. It represents someone who's independent, somebody who can exist outside of the traditional structures that, you were born into. You're potentially someone who's an entrepreneur. You're starting your own business. You're sourcing your value from your interior authentic self. You're not sourcing it from your job or a relationship, right? And again, I had mentioned this before, but this is going to be a major theme moving forward. It already has been, but as far as the age of Aquarius goes, that's where we're going to have to learn to source our strength and source our power is from the core of our authentic selves, right? Yeah, and then Temperance came out. I'm actually feeling this is going to be a little bit of a short message, but I'm getting the sense that this is connected to that 9 of Cups that we got earlier. Leaning into both of our emotions, but also this is the card of Aquarius. Is it? The star is the card of Aquarius, but I was getting like Aquarius energy coming off of this for some reason. And we were talking about that era of Pluto and Aquarius and us tapping into our inner authenticity. I think the emotional fulfillment comes when we allow ourselves to be who we really are and we don't source our power from outside ourselves, right? I think once we get into that flow, like I was talking about the water grand trine, we're stepping into that lazy river and like letting the emotions drive us forward without that need to control. That's where we're really starting to see our power starting to rise in a much different way, because in a patriarchal society, that's not how we view power. But we have been talking a lot about the divine feminine rising on the planet. There needs to be a balance of both, obviously feminine and masculine, but the masculine has sort of taken an outsized role in creating our society. And now we have to find a way to balance both inside of ourselves and also as a collective. So guys, I think I'm going to leave it there. It's a little bit of a short message. I will be back for the new moon video, and I hope you guys are doing really well, and I will talk to you soon. For personal readings, by the way, check my website, whatawitchknows.com.